Mueller Report, Volume 2, Track 9, Section 2.2b, page 24. The President's conduct concerning the investigation of Michael Flynn. Overview. During the presidential transition, incoming National Security Advisor Michael Flynn had 2 phone calls with the Russian ambassador to the United States about the Russian response to U.S. sanctions imposed because of Russia's election interference. After the press reported on Flynn's contacts with the Russian ambassador, Flynn lied to incoming administration officials by saying he had not discussed sanctions on the calls. The officials publicly repeated those lies in press interviews. The FBI, which previously was investigating Flynn for other matters, interviewed him about the calls in the first week after the inauguration, and Flynn told similar lies to the FBI. On January 26, 2017, Department of Justice, DOJ, officials notified the White House that Flynn and the Russian ambassador had discussed sanctions and that Flynn had been interviewed by the FBI. The next night, the President had a private dinner with FBI Director James Comey in which he asked for Comey's loyalty. On February 13, 2017, the President asked Flynn to resign. The following day, the President had a one-on-one conversation with Comey in which he said, "I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go." Evidence. 1. Incoming National Security Advisor Flynn discusses sanctions on Russia with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Shortly after the election, President-elect Trump announced he would appoint Michael Flynn as his National Security Advisor. For the next 2 months, Flynn played an active role on the Presidential Transition Team, PTT, coordinating policy positions and communicating with foreign government officials, including Russian Ambassador to the United States Sergei Kislyak. On December 29, 2016, as noted in Volume 2, Section 2A.4, Supra, the Obama administration announced that it was imposing sanctions and other measures on several Russian individuals and entities. That day, multiple members of the PTT exchanged emails about the sanctions and the impact they would have on the incoming administration, and Flynn informed members of the PTT that he would be speaking to the Russian ambassador later in the day. Flynn, who was in the Dominican Republic at the time, and K.T. McFarland, who was slated to become the Deputy National Security Advisor and was at the Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida with the President-elect and other senior staff, talked by phone about what, if anything, Flynn should communicate to Kislyak about the sanctions. McFarland had spoken with incoming administration officials about the sanctions and Russia's possible responses and thought she had mentioned in those conversations that Flynn was scheduled to speak with Kislyak. Based on those conversations, McFarland informed Flynn that incoming administration officials at Mar-a-Lago did not want Russia to escalate the situation. At 4:43 p.m. that afternoon, McFarland sent an email to several officials about the sanctions and informed the group that Jen Flynn is talking to Russian ambassador this evening. Approximately 1 hour later, McFarland met with the President-elect and senior officials and briefed them on the sanctions and Russia's possible responses. Incoming Chief of Staff Reince Priebus recalled that McFarland may have mentioned at the meeting that the sanctions situation could be cooled down and not escalated. McFarland recalled that at the end of the meeting, someone may have mentioned to the President-elect that Flynn was speaking to the Russian ambassador that evening. McFarland did not recall any response by the President-elect. Priebus recalled that the President-elect viewed the sanctions as an attempt by the Obama administration to embarrass him by delegitimizing his election. Immediately after discussing the sanctions with McFarland on December 29, 2016, Flynn called Kislyak and requested that Russia respond to the sanctions only in a reciprocal manner, without escalating the situation. After the call, Flynn briefed McFarland on its substance. Flynn told McFarland that the Russian response to the sanctions was not going to be escalatory because Russia wanted a good relationship with the Trump administration. On December 30, 2016, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced that Russia would not take retaliatory measures in response to the sanctions at that time and would instead plan further steps to restore Russian-US relations based on the policies of the Trump administration. Following that announcement, the President-elect tweeted, "Great move on delay, by V. Putin, I always knew he was very smart." On December 31, 2016, Kislyak called Flynn and told him that Flynn's request had been received at the highest levels and Russia had chosen not to retaliate in response to the request. Later that day, Flynn told McFarland about this follow-up conversation with Kislyak and Russia's decision not to escalate the sanctions situation based on Flynn's request. McFarland recalled that Flynn thought his phone call had made a difference. Flynn spoke with other incoming administration officials that day, but does not recall whether they discussed the sanctions. Flynn recalled discussing the sanctions issue with incoming administration official Stephen Bannon the next day. Flynn said that Bannon appeared to know about Flynn's conversations with Kislyak, and he and Bannon agreed that they had stopped the train on Russia's response to the sanctions. On January 3, 2017, Flynn saw the president-elect in person and thought they discussed the Russian reaction to the sanctions, but Flynn did not have a specific recollection of telling the president-elect about the substance of his calls with Kislyak. Members of the intelligence community were surprised by Russia's decision not to retaliate in response to the sanctions. When analyzing Russia's response, they became aware of Flynn's discussion of sanctions with Kislyak. Previously, the FBI had opened an investigation of Flynn based on his relationship with the Russian government. Flynn's contacts with Kislyak became a key component of that investigation. 2. President-elect Trump is briefed on the intelligence community's assessment of Russian interference in the election and Congress opens election interference investigations. On January 6, 2017, as noted in Volume 2, Section 2A.4, Supra, intelligence officials briefed President-elect Trump and the incoming administration on the intelligence community's assessment that Russia had interfered in the 2016 presidential election. When the briefing concluded, Comey spoke with the president-elect privately to brief him on unverified, personally sensitive allegations compiled by Steele. According to a memorandum Comey drafted immediately after their private discussion, the president-elect began the meeting by telling Comey he had conducted himself honorably over the prior year and had a great reputation. The president-elect stated that he thought highly of Comey, looked forward to working with him, and hoped that he planned to stay on as FBI director. Comey responded that he intended to continue serving in that role. Comey then briefed the president-elect on the sensitive material in the Steele reporting. Comey recalled that the president-elect seemed defensive, so Comey decided to assure him that the FBI was not investigating him personally. Comey recalled he did not want the president-elect to think of the conversation as a J. Edgar Hoover move. On January 10, 2017, the media reported that Comey had briefed the president-elect on the Steele reporting, and BuzzFeed News published information compiled by Steele online, stating that the information included specific, unverified, and potentially unverifiable allegations of contact between Trump aides and Russian operatives. The next day, the president-elect expressed concern to intelligence community leaders about the fact that the information had leaked and asked whether they could make public statements refuting the allegations in the Steele reports. In the following weeks, 3 congressional committees opened investigations to examine Russia's interference in the election and whether the Trump campaign had colluded with Russia. On January 13, 2017, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, SSCI, announced that it would conduct a bipartisan inquiry into Russian interference in the election, including any links between Russia and individuals associated with political campaigns. On January 25, 2017, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, PSI, announced that it had been conducting an investigation into Russian election interference and possible coordination with the political campaigns. And on February 2, 2017, the Senate Judiciary Committee announced that it too would investigate Russian efforts to intervene.